Do you also find it difficult to build up a meaningful relationship with your grandchildren at a distance? As a long-distance aunt to a 2-year-old in Australia, I wanted to create a solution for the millions of family members who cannot be physically together all the time. This is why I created Peekabond, an app that helps you to connect with young children at a distance. The app works with the following 3 steps. First, we give playful activities suggestions that are based on your child's development stage. These suggestions are science-based and gamified. Secondly, you can create a private family circle. And finally, we'll let you send videos back and forth so you don't have to be live at the same time and save them in one spot for your grandchild to watch. We've got over 120 content suggestions. You can build a love bank for your grandchildren. And if you go to the Cool Grandpa website and look for the affiliate links, sign up for a newsletter with a lot of inspiring content, or you can try the app for free.
The relationship that can exist between a grandparent and a grandchild is unique and powerful. It should be embraced and celebrated in a big way. That's why I created Grandparents Week, a full week celebrating and equipping grandparents with insights shared from world-class experts and thought leaders on becoming a more influential and cherished grandparent. Hi, I'm Aaron Larson, founder of GrandparentsAcademy.com, the first and only online academy dedicated to helping grandparents grow meaningful relationships and rich legacies with their loved ones from any distance. I'd like to personally invite you to Grandparents Week, starting on National Grandparents Day, Sunday, September 11th through Saturday, September 17th. I'm bringing together experts from all over the world to help you make the most of your special role as a grandparent. You'll hear a variety of interesting topics, including cultivating healthy cooking habits with grandchildren, becoming a fully engaged grandfather, nurturing strong and meaningful relationships from a distance, creating a photo legacy, and more. This is a virtual event, meaning you can watch these interviews and trainings online from the comfort of your home. And best of all, general admission is free. Our way of saying thanks to all grandparents out there for all that you do. Claim your ticket and come celebrate Grandparents Week with us by clicking the link in the show notes at the end of this episode. We hope to see you there.
Welcome in. I'm glad you're joining us for another conversation on the Cool Grandpa podcast. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. If you have not liked and subscribed to the show on your podcast provider, please do so. It's a great way that I can keep track of downloads and I can follow particular topics. And then the ones that have obviously high downloads, that means I need to do more of those types of topics. So I need some of that data, but I also want to make sure that I'm serving you well. The other thing too is that if you haven't done so already, please share this podcast with friends and family. Sharing is the best way to get the news out about the Cool Grandpa podcast and allows me to serve more people. Now, this week's conversation is with Jerry Zezima. Jerry is a humorist. Jerry has won many awards, including 7 for humorous writing from the National Society of Newspaper Columnists. And Jerry is just a funny guy. He and I, and you're going to pick this up, have a lot of back and forth banter. He has some great insights as well as, helpful hints about not taking this role of grandpa too serious. There's so much everyday humor to be found if we just put on that lens and we look at life in a way that, you can enjoy and kind of laugh at the little things. So, hey, without further ado, let's get in and talk with Jerry. Hello, and welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. This is your host, Greg Payne, coming at you from Studio 12. This podcast is about being the best possible grandpa you can be, focusing on what it is to be a grandpa and how we can all share that experience together for our grandchildren. Hi, Jerry. Welcome into the Cool Grandpa Podcast. I'm excited to have another cool grandpa to talk to this evening.
Well, Greg, thank you for lowering your otherwise high standards to have me on. You're a brave man, and I appreciate it.
I'm going to enjoy this conversation quite a bit because as you and I have been exchanging some emails, I can definitely tell that we're going to enjoy throwing some one-liners and some zingers back and forth. And that always makes for a really fun conversation.
There'll be many liners.
Hopefully one or two of them will be memorable as well.
I hope so. I hope we can remember them.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it could easily turn into be, oh man, I was going to say something, but I always love starting these conversations off with getting the perspective from the grandfathers or the memories of when the kids told you for the first time that you were going to become a grandfather and what that reaction was to you.
Well, this was very memorable, speaking of memories, because my wife, Sue, and I have two daughters, Katie and Lauren. Lauren, the younger daughter, announced first that she was going to have a baby. So what happened was my wife, Sue, was out. I guess she went for a walk. The doorbell didn't ring because we don't have a doorbell. But I heard a knock on the door, a pounding on the door. I opened the door, and there is Lauren and her husband, Guillaume, and their dog, Maggie. So Maggie jumped up and licked me and all that, and Guillaume gave me a hug, and Lauren gave me a hug. I said, come on in. So what do we owe this honor? And said, oh, we just thought we would stop by. And I said, okay. I said, well, where's Mom? He said, well, she's out for a walk. I said, no, come on in. And I asked Guillaume if he wanted anything, and he usually doesn't have anything stronger than a sports drink, and he said, no, thanks. I asked Lauren if she wanted anything, and usually she'll have a glass of wine. And she said, no, thanks, I'll just have a glass of water. I said, all right, it's kind of, kind of different. Well, anyway, we made small talk. Sue came home. We made some more small talk. And then Lauren and Guillaume stood up right in front of us and held hands and said, we have something to tell you. And we said, what? And Lauren said, there's going to be an addition to the family. And I said, you're getting another dog? And she rolled her eyes, and that typical son-daughter rolling their eyes move, and she said, no, I'm expecting a baby. Well, Sue and I jumped out of our chairs. We hugged and kissed Lauren. We hugged and kissed Guillaume. We hugged and kissed each other. And we hugged and kissed Maggie, who was very excited because she was going to be a big sister. And so we said, well, this is the greatest news in the world. Why don't you stay for dinner? And Lauren said, okay. And she said, you have a job. She said to me, and I said, well, what do you mean? She said, you have to paint. And I said, I'm retired from painting. Mom has put me through the paces with painting and all that. She said, no, you have to paint the baby's room. And I said, I just came out of retirement. And Guillaume and I ultimately painted the baby's room, but it was unexpected. It was wonderful and memorable. And that's the story of how I found out that I would be, for the first time, a grandfather.
Oh, that's awesome. So there was no little voice in the back of your head about like, wait a second, grandpas are old people. I'm not old yet. Not
only was there no little voice in the back of my head, there's really nothing much in my head at all. But I wrote in one of my books, you have to be young to be a grandfather. And if you're not, being a grandfather will make you young. And that's what I have found, that it is one of the greatest things in the world.
Oh, so, yeah.
But yeah, no, I didn't have that little voice. I have a little voice about other things. But,
Sure. Yeah. Well, and I enjoyed getting this perspective because everybody that I talk to has, one, it's a very unique story, but then two, lots of different reactions, because I've certainly talked with other grandfathers that were like, man, I never thought the kids would ever make me a grandfather. And then some of the other folks where it's like, holy crap, I'm still in my 40s and still trying to figure life out. What are you doing to me?
Sue and I were in one of the reasons I became a writer is I can't do math. So I'm trying to figure this out. We were in our late 50s. We're in our late 60s now. And our oldest grandchild, the one, of course, that was announced in that memorable story, is now 9. But Sue and I said to each other, on more than one occasion, gee, I wonder if this is ever going to happen. But we never pressed either one of our daughters. And we said, it'll happen. And it'll happen at the right time and when they're ready. And sure enough, it did. I have heard that 4 times, but I have 5 grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
So the youngest 2 are twins.
Oh,
so
fun.
That was the other big surprise, was that our older daughter, Katie, who has now 3 children, had a child, and she and her husband, Dave, came over, and they announced, they said, guess what? And we guessed it. We said, oh, you're expecting another baby. And Katie said, no, we're expecting 2. I said, oh my God.
Wow.
So that was great too.
Yeah. How did the other kids rally around that young set of twins?
Well, the oldest, or the older, the only child they had at the time, a boy, loved it. He, I forget how old he was at the time, maybe 2.5, something like that. And it was brotherly love from the beginning. And so Sue and I visited Katie and Dave, and I became adept at feeding the twins simultaneously on this pillow you put around you, and put one baby on each side of you, and it's called My Breast Friend. And yeah, it's true. And it was marvelous. It was wonderful, and the whole experience of being a grandfather has been phenomenal, just wonderful.
Now, how have you been able to start to develop the relationship with the grandchildren, and especially with the I'm going to call it unusual occupation of being a humorist and a writer, because there's that lens that I think you're probably looking through that might be a little bit different than the typical granddad.
Right. Well, first of all, the grandchildren range in age from 9 to almost 3. The twins will be 3 next month. And they're all more mature than I am. So this gives me like carte blanche to do crazy stuff. Gives me entree into their lives. I run around with them, play with them. Just very active in their lives, and it hasn't been especially easy, of course, because of the pandemic. In fact, the youngest 3 don't live around where we do, so we hadn't seen them in a year and a half, and we just visited them. It was the 3rd time in 2.5 years that we had seen them. I'm not Mr. Tech, but thank goodness for FaceTime. The oldest 2, they live pretty close by, and we do get to see them pretty often. But even during the depth of the pandemic, my wife Sue and I would go up, but we have to keep a safe social distance. We'd have to be outside, and would see them through the door or the window, and often it was cold, so we had to bundle up. But we managed to do it, and now that things are opening up a bit, we've been able to see them and hug them and kiss them and play with them and do all kinds of crazy stuff.
Did that experience of needing to keep the distance with the pandemic, do you think really spark some more creativity on that interaction? The maybe even more goofy faces through the window, maybe even some more different activities where, they do something, you do something.
I might have done that stuff anyway, because I told you about the maturity thing.
Right.
But yeah, it was hard for everyone. I mean, everyone through the pandemic, and on families. Even if you didn't have children or grandchildren, but in our case, I mean, Sue and I missed a lot, especially with the twins. We hadn't we saw them the month, I guess, after they were born, 2 months after they were born, and then didn't see them again for a year and a half. So it was pretty hard. But as I said, we did FaceTime, so they knew who we were. I think they initially thought each of us was like 3 inches tall, but it was we made up for it, and we've had a ball, whether we're there with them or we're on the screen. We always have fun.
Oh, that's great. Other thing I wanted to ask you about was, have you developed any particular, let's say, grandpa-grandchild activities? Like, sometimes people will do Mondays we go for ice cream down to the ice cream parlor and have a chance, one-on-one time or one-on multiple time.
We go for ice cream at every opportunity. In fact, earlier this year, we went, and it ended up being probably the coldest day of the year, seemingly. We went out, and our oldest two grandchildren, girls, our granddaughters, said, "Oh, Poppy," that's my name, Poppy. My wife, Sue, is Nini. "Let's go for ice cream." And I looked at my phone. It was 42 degrees. And with the wind chill factor, it was freezing. So it's hard to enjoy ice cream when it's as cold as the air temperature. But we went, and we sat in the car, and of course turned on the heat. But so we do that. The girls have a trampoline in the backyard, so I've been on there innumerable times. Bouncing up and down, playing, dancing, those kinds of things. We visited recently, as I said, the youngest three. We went to the playground, and I took them to the playground one day, and there were a whole bunch of kids there with, of course, their parents. I was the only grandparent. And these kids, not just my grandchildren, a lot of these kids were flocking to me. And one of the fathers said, "Oh, you're the playground grandpa." And I said, "Wow, that's quite an honor." So I guess I have this thing that kids want to goof off and play with me, and with my grandchildren, and have fun and run around and all that. So as I said, I'm pretty active with them.
I think kids get the vibe with adults. Yep. They pick up that energy of like, this person's in a bad mood. This person's way too serious. This person is whatever. Yeah. And then definitely having that playful spirit and that vibe. I can see that pulling the kids over and wanting to have fun and explore and try different things and be goofy and feel like, okay, I enjoy your goofiness. You're not the adult that's saying, we don't do that.
So no, we have fun. Of course, you can't say yes to everything or do things that or the child may get hurt doing, or things that are just inappropriate. You don't do that. But otherwise, they're kids, and having fun is their job. So I figure I might as well join in, and it's great. And we have a wonderful, close, loving, fun relationship.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I did want to ask you about, and it ties in with what we were just talking about, is that sometimes, we hear about how creativity kind of, we lose it as we get older. We lose some of the playfulness as we get older. Some of that is education, some of that's work, some of it's life. Have you ever thought about ways that adults and grandfathers in particular might be able to tap back into that humorous, playful side that we might not always be able to easily access?
Well, I think it should be the reverse of the way it usually is. You want the kids to emulate you in being, doing things they should be doing and all that. But as far as having fun, emulate the kids and let them lead. I have written a lot about my grandchildren, about the fun things that we do, and I've always had like a playful outlook, even before they came along, before our daughters were born. I was the class clown in high school, and I knew I wanted to be a writer then, and my decision could be encapsulated in one word: algebra. I could never do algebra. I was always better in subjects where you really didn't have to know the answers, like English composition.
Right.
And I would write silly, stupid, goofy stuff. Sometimes you have to get up in front of the class to read it. I'd get laughs, and I'd say, this is what I'd like to do. So I read my hometown paper, the Stamford Advocate in Connecticut, and I read the great humor columnists, Art Buchwald and Irma Bombeck, and I said, that's what I want to do. I want to write a humor column. And a year out of college, I walked over to the office of the Stamford Advocate, no experience, announced I wanted a job, and I had to take a test. Fortunately, it was not an algebra test. And I did well enough because I got the job. I was hired, but there were some questions to which I did not know the answers. So instead of leaving them blank or taking half-hearted guesses, I made up the silliest, stupidest, funniest, dumbest stuff I could think of. And the editor later said, that's what got you the job. It showed signs of creativity. And so even then, I had a playful outlook on things. And I was many things. I was a copy boy, I was a sports writer, feature writer, an editor. And ultimately, I got a humor column. And I started it in 1985. Been writing it for 37 years. It's nationally and internationally syndicated, and I've written 6 books.
Well, and I've been enjoying the book that I picked up was Grandfather Knows Best. I figured
Right.
with being the Cool Grandpa show that I'll start there and then work towards, One for the Ageless, which is the latest book. And I thought it was really interesting how you've been able to keep that lens through so many years of here's the situation, but then here's kind of the quirky side of it. Here's how just what I like to call off center, right? It's
Right.
You had a great story about going strawberry picking, and
Yes. Yeah.
you're taught. You just start the conversation with the one woman about finding the hidden strawberries at the low levels, and if you step on one, well, that's jam, and that was great. And then I got to the part and loved it was when you wrote to Prince Charles and congratulated him on his grandson being born. Can you talk to us a little bit about that one? That was hilarious.
Well, I'll tell you, to preface that, Lauren and Guillaume, when they got married, they were married the day after William and Kate were married. So I wrote to the royal family. This is absolutely true. Everything I write is true, and I actually do these things. I take things one step further than any normal person would take them because, of course, I'm not normal. but I wrote to the royal family and to William and Kate, congratulating them and saying that they were the great opening act for the real wedding of the century, which was Lauren and Guillaume. And I got a letter back from someone in the
Right.
royal family. So when my granddaughter was born, the first grandchild, I said, I'm going to write to Prince Charles, because he and I were new grandfathers. And I did get a response to that, but it was more of a form letter. But I thought, you know what? I have a good in with the royal family now from the wedding of the century, and so I did that, and I wrote a column about it, and it turned out that I did get a response, and it was a lot of fun to do that, and this is the kind of stuff I do. Now the book you're reading, Grandfather Knows Best, is my third one. But the first one to feature grandchildren. The first two were Leave It to Boomer. It's the first one because I'm a baby boomer.
Mm-hmm.
Second one, The Empty Nest Chronicles, because my wife and I became empty nesters. The epilogue to that one had the story I just told you about finding out I was going to be a grandfather. So then there's Grandfather Knows Best, and that was with just our oldest grandchild. The fourth one, Nini and Poppy's Excellent Adventures, added two more grandchildren. So we had three when that one came out, and got a lot of grandfatherly material out of that. The fifth one rather, Every Day is Saturday. I had retired from my day job as an editor. I continued to write the column. And I said to my wife, Sue, who hadn't retired yet, when you're retired, every day is Saturday. But at that time, the twins were born. So I added two more. And this latest one for the ageless, How to Stay Young and Immature, Even If You're Really Old, incorporates all five grandchildren. So I've written a lot about my grandchildren. I don't believe in cruel or mean-spirited humor. I poke fun at myself. And when I write about my family, it's with a lot of love and warmth. And I just goof on me. And I write about family foibles and the funny little things of everyday life. So it's not all, children and grandchildren. I write about, other things as well. But I think it's stuff that a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah, well, I find too that it's interesting as I've been reading more of the book and then the articles. I almost say blog. I don't know if you differentiate between blogs and articles at this point.
The difference is the spelling. No, I put my columns on my blog.
Okay.
I don't have a fancy web page or anything like that. I would have to ask my 9-year-old granddaughter to show me how to do it. So, but no, yeah, it's I post the columns on the blog.
Oh, yeah. You brought that up. I can't wait until my grandson, who's about to turn 4, hits about 9 or so, because then he's going to be in there being my web editor.
Right.
And
right.
He's going to take over my social media. He's going to be, because I figure I can pay the kids off in ice cream.
Yes, there you go. And it would, of course, with ice cream, would have to be cold cash, right? Well, a friend of mine who became a grandfather before I became one said, as soon as the oldest one reaches a certain age, they're your IT person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, It used to be because I'm Gen X, so with us it was the joke about setting the clock on the VCR. And I think that's about where my generation peaked in our youthful IT experience. But now these little kids grow up and they've got a device in their hand before they're 2.
Yeah, and they know what to do with it. I've talked to people who said, "Oh, my 1-year-old grandson's swiping my phone, and 2-year-old knows how to break into a mother's phone with the password, or they circumvent the password somehow or other.
Yeah.
I can't do this stuff.
No.
I can barely figure out the TV remote.
Exactly. Well, and I lose patience with it. It's like, I can't figure this out.
Yeah.
It's not worth it. I'm putting the Kindle down. I'm grabbing a book.
Right. I don't have a Kindle. I don't even have kindling because I don't have a fireplace. But I just read books.
Yeah.
I write them and I read them.
What has been one of your observations in terms of kids growing up these days as you're watching the grandchildren growing up versus when your daughters were about the same age? Not necessarily parenting differences, but just, let's say, I don't know, kind of the world that they're coming into and, what their expectations or what we're seeing their expectations to be.
Well, first of all, as I've said and I've written, if you think your kids grow up fast, wait till you have grandchildren. It's like, my wife says, oh, every time you turn around, they're, a year older. I said, well, don't turn around. But a lot of people say the difference between having children and having grandchildren is with grandchildren, you can have fun with them and then you can give them back. I've never understood that. I don't want to give them back. I want to be with them as long as I can. You don't really have to be a disciplinarian with your grandkids the way parents are, and you don't want to do or say things that the parents wouldn't approve of. As far as the kind of world they're coming into, I happen to look at things with a positive spin. A lot of people say these days, "Oh my God, world's going to hell in a handbasket," and all that. I happen to think the world is filled with wonderful people, and every generation, whether you're parents or grandparents, look at the times and then the young people and say, "Oh, it wasn't this bad when I was young, and it was always better when I was young." Well, yeah and no. I would hear my parents, whom I love, and my grandparents the same. Oh, it was a simpler time. It was a better time. And one time I said to one of them, I said, you grew up during the Great Depression, followed immediately by World War II. How good could that have been? And you really have to make the most of the time you're in. And, then there was the 60s. I was a kid, it was the social turbulence and all that, and Watergate, Vietnam War, and all. There's always bad stuff going on. But if you look at the positive and say, you know what, maybe our children or our grandchildren will help solve these problems. Have faith in them. I mentioned Art Buchwald before, great humor columnist. He did a lot of public speaking, and he would often address high school and college graduating classes. He always said at the end of every speech, he said to the graduates, "We adults have left you a perfect world. Don't screw it up." Well, I guess we haven't, but I have faith that the younger people will do okay.
Yeah, and I agree with that quite a bit, because I've had these kinds of conversations with other grandfathers, other parents, and I have heard as I've gotten older the whole, oh, things were much better back then and everything else. But then I sit here and, I read and I study Julius Caesar, the changeover of the Roman Empire, all that stuff. And I'm like, they were still writing back then about how worried they were about the future and about how all these young people that were coming up through the ranks were going to screw everything up that they had worked so hard to get.
Right. See, I don't worry about that because I've never really worked hard. I just do my goofball thing. But again, it's a generational thing. It's the same with music. for example. What? Oh my! Beatles were coming in when I was a kid. My parents and grandparents said, "What's that noise?" Elvis Presley and the Rolling Stones and all. Oh, that's a bunch of junk. I could imagine. You go back years and years and years, generations, and some kid is banging out a song on the piano, and the father says, "What is that garbage you're listening to?" And the kid would say, "Well, Dad, it's the latest by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart." And the father would say, "Well, play something good." It's been the same thing for decades, for generations. And people today say, "Oh, these kids, they're always on their phones and they don't know how to communicate." The first part is true, but the second part is not. They communicate a lot better than we did. We didn't have the phones then, but I just tend to take a more positive view, and I think that even though the world is in pretty tough shape in many ways, it kind of always has been, but it's also wonderful, and focus on that.
Yeah, and I think that's where for me, that's where some of the viewing, the experience and viewing the world through a humor lens can help out, because you can see that, hey, there's foibles today, there were foibles yesterday, there's going to be foibles tomorrow. Yeah. And you know what? As a grandfather, as a grandparent, I'm going to help my grandkids and all the other kids that they might be playing with, help them see that, help them communicate a little bit. Take some stress off. You don't have to be so serious.
Well, another problem, I think, is that people don't see the humor in things when they happen. They always say, oh, remember that time? It's like last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago. Oh, that was so funny. But it wasn't at the time. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't that bad. So I think it's great to see the humor in things when they happen. And if your children, or now with us, grandchildren, are goofing around and playing or being a little loud or whatever, well, that's what they do. And don't discourage it. And as I said, I've gotten a gold mine of material writing about my children, and now, of course, my grandchildren. And I see it a little differently with my grandchildren, because obviously I'm so much older than they are, but we do connect a lot, and it's wonderful.
You got to tell me you do try to slip in some Beatles and Rolling Stones in the car with the kids every so often, right?
I no. First of all, we don't have their car seats. So we used to. They know whatever music is popular today. They've never heard of the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. And honestly, Greg, I'm supposed to have like Sirius radio in my car, and I'm not a serious person, so I don't know how to do it, how to find the songs. I don't drive that far anymore, anyhow. So no, I've never tried to slip that into that.
To indoctrinate them. Yeah. No, that's great. With my kids, just on the music thing, was I always like to, when they were listening to their music, and never tried to dissuade them from that, but I'd always kind of go, hey, you know where these guys got that? They got that from this band. Why don't you listen to, some of that? So that's where I slip in the music a little bit. Right. Is like, check this out.
The other thing is, you get caught up in the movies and the cartoons they like to watch, and they'll go over and they'll say, "Oh, Poppy, you and Nini want to watch Encanto or Frozen 2," and we've seen each one half a dozen times, but every time they ask, of course, and we sit there with them and we watch it, and it's actually very good and creative stuff.
Yeah.
But one of these days, I'm going to try to, don't tell their parents, indoctrinate them into the Three Stooges.
Ooh.
Yeah.
The classics.
Certainly. So anyway, but no, I mean, it's been a ball. and it's been wonderful. Again, there have been challenges with the pandemic and not actually being able to see them in person for long stretches, but we have a lot of love and a lot of laughter, and I think that's the most important thing.
Oh yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. Jerry, I've had you on for a while. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would like to talk about, or anything about being a grandparent that you would love to share with us?
You haven't asked me for the winning Powerball numbers, so thank you. I don't have them. Um, as far as being a grandparent, enjoy it. Um, laugh with your grandchildren. As I said, I've written a lot about them, and in part because it's my job and I love to do it, but also because one of these days I may still be around, they may not, but they'll go to my books and say, "Oh, Poppy wrote about us," and there's that legacy, and really the vast majority of people don't have that. I decided when I was started my humor column, am I going to write about? And a lot of people say, "Oh, that must be a difficulty for a writer coming up with ideas." Well, if you write about everyday life, things happen every day, so it's seldom a problem coming up with an idea, but it's what you make of it, and they pop up all the time. I mean, I could be with one of my or several of my grandchildren, not intending to write something, and they'll say something that's funny, or we'll do something. Recently, I haven't written about this yet, but my granddaughter got a new bike, and I don't have one, so I had to run after her, and I just nearly collapsed face first onto the street. But it was fun. It was great exercise. And I firmly believe that exercise and health food will kill you. But lately, I've gone to the gym a few times. My wife goes all the time. And I was on one of the bikes, stationary bikes. And I was talking to one of the gym people, the manager, I guess. And she said, "Oh, yeah, my father is a grandfather, and he chases his grandchildren around on the bike." And I said, "There you go. There's a column. The grandparenting thing with bikes."
Mm-hmm.
And so an idea will pop up almost out of nowhere, and often it involves the grandchildren. But again, they're all columns, and the books are written with love and warmth, and I poke fun at myself, and I hope people, I think they do appreciate that. They can see themselves, whether they're parents or grandparents, and then later on, my grandchildren will say, "Oh, Poppy wrote this funny column about me, and it was great." Or, "I remember when we did this or that." And so it's been wonderful.
Where can people find you? Where can people track down your books?
Well, they can find me probably in the police station. I hope not. They can find my books on Amazon. It would help if they knew how to spell my name to look it up. It's Jerry, Jerry. Last name Zezima. It's Z as in zebra, E, another Z, I, M as in Mary, A, and go to Amazon. That's the best place. Barnes and Noble has the books too. Some independent bookstores, I believe, but most people these days do it the Amazon way. So that would be the best place. I've got an author page there, and if you like to laugh and you like to read about yourself, really, because a lot of this stuff is very relatable to a lot of people, and especially for your audience and our group for grandparents. I think it's stuff they'll enjoy.
Well, and I'll be sure to put links to the Amazon page as well as, your blog page, so people can check out the articles and check everything out and find you.
Thank you. So you know how to do that. See, I could never do that. I would have missing links.
Yeah. No, I've had to master at least that piece of technology.
Yes. Well, you do it very well.
Well, thank you so much. And I really do appreciate you being on the Cool Grandpa podcast. So thanks for stopping by.
You're very welcome, Greg. Thank you for having me. And to all the grandparents out there, enjoy, have fun, love your grandchildren, and laugh with them. It'll be great.
Thanks. What a fun conversation with Jerry. I really enjoyed learning so much about his experience with becoming a humor columnist, and then also his interactions and his experience with becoming a grandfather himself. Now, I've got some links in the show notes for Jerry's blog post, and then also quickly you can find him in Amazon. I went ahead and grabbed the link, and that's in the show notes as well. So I don't have any kind of an affiliation with Amazon, but like Jerry said, that's the best place and where most people are ordering books. So to make it easy, I put that link in there for you. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. And until next time, remember to stay cool. Thank you for listening to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and share it with a friend. That's the best way you can help us to expand our community, as well as get the news out about how valuable grandpas are in the lives of those kids. If you'd like to leave me a comment or shoot me a potential topic for this podcast, please go to www.cool-grandpa.us. Look for the comments tab, fill it out, hit submit. It's as easy as that. Until next time, remember to stay cool.